Welcome back everyone to Itsnotjunktv for another episode from our Rescued from the Landfill series. I'm Jarvis, your host, and you definitely want to stick around for today's episode because you may need to know some of this info someday. So hang tight and enjoy. On today's episode, we're going to be doing a light restore on this antique cast iron wood stove that I picked up from a scrap guy. It was on the back of his truck heading out to be scrapped. I pulled it off in a couple different pieces. Wasn't for sure it was all there, but fortunately it was. Very heavy, had to be moved in several pieces because I was moving it around by myself. Not real bad rusted, not overly abused, as you could say. Needed some work, but here we go. We're going to get into doing most of this by hand because I was indoors. Trying not to get the dust all over. It was really cold out when I was doing this. So everything's done by hand. I'm going to start off scraping down any of the bad, scaly, leftover soot and whatnot from the inside. I'm not going to do a whole lot to the interior because I figure it's going to get burned off there anyway after the first few fires. I'm mainly worried about the exterior. So we're going to start off by taking a wire brush and getting everything clean, getting all the loose rust and debris off of it, and then we'll go from there to the next. So I'm just going to keep on wire brushing. As you can tell, there's some slight rust on the back here, but nothing real heavy. Definitely nothing to be concerned about. Didn't wear through, no soft spots, nothing like that. But just going to keep on wire brushing until I get all this loose scale removed. Even with this stove taken apart, it is still extremely heavy. Just moving the back section here around tends to be kind of a pain. That's one reason I was redoing this in the house, is because I knew once it got put back together and was completely sealed up, I would not be able to move it by myself. So that's why it's kind of being built in place. So we're going to continue on, keep the wire brushing going. Now that all the wire brushing's done and the loose rust and scale and every dirt and everything else, now I'm taking some of my favorite cleaner, which is the Awesome brand from the Dollar Tree. I use this to clean a lot of things. Just try not to use it on painted surfaces because I have noticed that it will soften up some paints, but just on this steel, take it, spray it down, and take a green scrubby pad and scrub it clean, and it tends to remove all the residues and leaves a pretty good surface. So that's what I'm going to do here, is scrub everything down real good, give it a good wipe down, and get it ready for the next step. Alright guys, now that everything's all been cleaned, scrubbed, rubbed, and wiped down, now we're going to get to the fun part. We're going to use an authentic, real stove black. We're not going to use any kind of paint. We're not going to use any kind of other sealers or anything on this. A good old-fashioned stove black. Not sure what it is. No, it don't put off much of an odor as it's curing. Again, because I'm putting this together inside, and that first fire is going to have to be done in the house. I was concerned about fumes, so going old school. Going to give it a good rub down. Basically, just need a rag, maybe a brush on some of the larger areas. Get it all worked in, rubbed in good. Here's a little before and after comparison of what this stove black could do to wore out old cast iron. Of course, none of this stuff's food safe, but as far as just using it on a decorative piece or something like this wood stove, as you can see, it does a heck of a job and it lasts forever. So now I've got everything all stove blacked and consistent and finished on the exterior. Again, like I said before, I'm not going to do a whole lot to the interior because the stove black is not going to last in there very long. And it's kind of a waste. And any kind of heat, and once I get a fire going, it's going to cook off any of this scaled rust or old soot or anything like that. So again, I'm not going to worry. So now we're going to start the assembly process. So here's a product that I'm using to seal up the joints in this old stove. And doing a little bit of research, I found out this is a Ben Franklin stove. They're kind of not rated good. They've been, as far as I can read, or as far as I've read, how about that? They're not the most efficient. They were drafty. They wasn't sealed up from the factory. So I think I'm going to take and use some of this, and we're going to seal up every crack, seam, connection, any place that would allow air to draft in, and other than the vents in the front, I'm going to seal it up. So I'm just going to take it, use it like you would any other mortar. Use a small putty knife, fingers, hands, toes, whatever it takes to get it pressed and filled into the cracks, and that's going to be the next step. Now that I've got a good bed of mortar laid down in this groove, I'm going to go ahead and set the back into place and get it seated and start at the bottom and build my way up. If you notice, I keep shifting everything around with this base. For some reason, this big old stove only sat on 3 feet. When I got it from the guy, I thought it was missing one and I was going to have to make a fourth. But what it actually ended up being is it teetered on 3 feet that wasn't even bolted on. They kind of sit in these little wedge shaped contraptions, and that's what's supposed to hold this, I would assume, once finished, 250-pound stove up. So if you see me fidgeting with the base, that's what it is. I'm nervous that these feet are not going to hold up. But hang tight, watch, and you'll see how, just like a big erector said, it starts to go back together. Now that I've got this back set down in this mortar, I'm going to take this opportunity to go ahead and fill the inside bottom edges and just in between this where the walls and the floor meet. I figured it'd be easier to do this now before I set the top and I don't end up bashing my head 50 times. Nothing fancy, no fancy tools. Just make sure you wear gloves because this is a little different than regular mortar. Sure, it's got some kind of asbestos or some nonsense added to it to make it fireproof, I guess it would be. But just a rubber latex glove in my finger, and I'm going to cake it into the corners and get as much of it as sealed up as I can. Now that I've got the back all puttied in at the bottom, I'm going to start laying in a good bead of this mortar along this seam, I guess you would call it, here on this top, and get it set. It's one of the heaviest pieces yet. Solid, got a bunch of different stuff in it. So I'm going to go ahead and get it mortared up, and then we'll get it set. It's done, it's done. No 2 takes. Again, here I am using my most valuable tool, my finger, and just going to spread and lay this in here pretty heavy. You don't want to get it thin. I've noticed this stuff around, if you get it too thin, the heat will just draw it up and it'll flake away. But if you can get it kind of built up about a 1/4 inch or so, right in that valley between those two surfaces where they meet, get it packed in there good, get it smoothed out. That tends to hold up. And also, you don't want to move the stove a whole lot after you get this stuff in and let it set. Alright guys, here it is, with the bottom, sides, back, top, all assembled. Everything's been mortared, everything's been sealed in. Done rubbed the stove black on it, probably going to go back and rub another coat down on it. But here it is, all assembled. Big open front stove. Really wish I'd have done research before I drug it home and put all the sweat equity in it, because they're not a very efficient stove. They just have no real way of dampening anything. But got to continue on. It's in here now, so let's see what it looks like completely put together. At the last minute, I noticed a small gap here where the sides and the bottom met. I know I filled it in well, and then I laid down a bed of this mortar for it to sit down into. But just as a precaution, I'm going to go ahead and fill this outside gap as well. Kind of leaves a mess. There's no way this stuff sticks to everything, and it does not wipe back off very easy. But I figure I'll clean up as best I can and go back and touch it up with some stove black. Shouldn't be very noticeable. Well, we're getting down into the home stretch here, folks. Now it's time to set these doors. A couple quick bolts, some stainless steel bolts that I'm going to use to hang them. Show you how to fit those up. Pretty easy. You just got to do some slight adjustments using your bolts. There's not a real way of setting these or changing them a whole lot. Use a little bit smaller bolt, and you can kind of wiggle and move and kind of get it to set in there better. But again, this stove, if you find these Benjamin Franklin stoves, I would not suggest anybody putting one in their home. If you want to stick one into a barn or something like that just to burn some waste wood with, it'd probably be alright, but not very efficient. Don't burn up anything. They leave a very dirty chimney, and all in all, just not the best stove. Now, if you've got a different opinion of that and you don't agree with me, and you've been able to adapt one of these old Ben Franklins to where they are an efficient stove, drop a line in the comment. Tell me what you done. Share it with everybody. Maybe somebody out there has one and they're burning through a lot of firewood every season. You got a good idea? Leave it down there. Maybe somebody can need it. Also, if you've made it this far in the video, if you've not hit that like, subscribe, or hit that bell icon so you get notified when my videos come out, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. You're going to miss out on this. You may actually learn something from my videos. So hit that bell icon. That way you don't miss an episode when these come out. Well, here it is, guys. All done. The made in Korea, 1970s Ben Franklin warm morning, I think it was, wood stove. Big monstrosity heavy, way too big for the platform that I set up here for a wood stove. To be perfectly honest with you, I ended up not using this stove. More research led me to believe that it was just going to be waste more wood than be beneficial. So although it was a fun one to restore and I was able to share it with you guys, and that way you can see, you could, in a pinch, you could use this, or like I say, if you had a man cave or a shed or a workshop or something like that that you wanted to use and just burn waste wood and scrap wood in, perfect stove. There's no use spending $300, $400, $500 on a stove for something like that. I appreciate everybody for sticking around this long. I know it's been a long video, a little bit unnormal for me, but my name is Jarvis. I appreciate you stopping by. This is Itsnotjunktv, and we've rescued another one from the landfill. Thanks for coming by.